The auction was reaching its climax. The murmur of drunken voices filled the smoky air of the Red Lantern Saloon, but all fell silent when a single hand rose from the dimmest corner. Rough, scarred, and steady, it hovered in the air like a challenge tossed into the room. Heads turned, curious eyes narrowing as they tried to pierce the shadows to see who dared interrupt. On a rough wooden platform near the bar, Clara Montgomery stood frozen. Only 19, her chestnut hair shimmered under the flickering oil lamps, framing her pale face and wide, terrified eyes. She clutched the torn edge of her faded dress. Her breath shallow as men threw prices on her like she was nothing more than livestock. Her father's debts had dragged her here, gambling away everything, including her freedom. The bidding had stalled at $30. Snake-Eye Malachi, with his gleaming gold teeth and cruel grin, was certain his prize was secured. But that unseen hand changed everything. Ezra Blackwood hadn't spoken since entering the saloon a half-hour ago. He'd positioned himself in his usual corner, half hidden beneath his battered hat. He nursed a drink he never touched, eyes cold and distant, watching. Most folks knew him as the recluse who lived beyond the cotton fields, 5 miles out of town. The man whose wife and daughter were taken from him in a fire years ago. But there was something few realized. Clara reminded him of what he'd lost. Snake Eye's face tightened into a sneer as he tried to locate the man who dared interfere. When his eyes locked onto Ezra, an oily laugh slipped from his throat. He controlled everything in Dust Creek, the crooked card games, the brothels, even the law. No one challenged him. Until now. Well, Snake Eye drawled, his voice slicing through the heavy air. The ghost farmer wants to play. Ezra rose, his tall frame unfolding slowly, like a man who carried both strength and sorrow. The creases on his weathered face revealed nothing, but the steely glint in his eyes sent a chill through the room. He pulled a small leather pouch from his coat. Coins clinked inside, breaking the silence. $50, Ezra spoke at last, his voice hoarse but firm. The crowd gasped. $50 was more than many men earned in half a year. Clara's breath hitched. Was this stranger here to save her? Or was he just another kind of danger? Snake Eye's grin faltered. He had expected a quick, easy purchase. Now his pride stood at stake before his men. He couldn't afford to look weak. 60, he snapped. Without pause, Ezra answered, 75. A wave of whispers swept across the saloon. Snake Eye's jaw clenched. He had power, but his purse wasn't bottomless. His reputation, however, was built on fear, not losing to backwater farmers. Jeremiah Cross, his right-hand man, leaned in, whispering something that made Snake Eye's lips curl into a wicked smile. "Tell you what," Snake Eye announced, his voice thick with mockery. "Let's not hide behind coins, farmer. Let's settle it like real men. Outside. Now, winner takes the girl. Loser takes a bullet." The crowd erupted. Nothing entertained Dust Creek more than bloodshed. Ezra's hand brushed aside, revealing a worn holster under his coat. Yet instead of fear, his eyes held a calm, deadly calculation. Even the most ruthless men in that saloon took a cautious step back. "I didn't come here for blood," Ezra said softly but firmly. "I came to buy her freedom." Snake Eye laughed, his voice like broken glass. "Freedom?" he spat. "Boy, the only freedom you'll find in Dust Creek comes from the barrel of a gun. Pay with gold or pay with lead, it's all the same." Clara, watching from the stage, heard something the others missed. Sincerity. This wasn't lust or possession. This man was risking his life for her freedom. She didn't even know his name, but somehow she trusted him. Outside, as the doors swung open, the entire town poured into the dusty street, eager for the show. Snake Eye strutted into the open, his spurs jingling, radiating confidence. 12 men had fallen to his gun already. He intended to make Ezra the 13th. "Last chance, farmer," Snake Eye sneered. "Throw down your money, crawl back to your crops, and maybe I'll let you live." Ezra stepped forward, his shadow long beneath the sinking sun, his movement steady. Clara stood behind the swinging doors, her pulse racing. Then old Pete shouted from the crowd, "$20 says the farmer won't even draw." Laughter rippled, but died quickly. As Ezra faced Snake Eye, the weight of something unseen hung in the air. His steel gray eyes betrayed no fear, only cold determination. Snake Eye narrowed his gaze. "You look familiar. Have we crossed paths before?" Ezra's voice was low, but the silence carried every word. "Fort Apache. 7 years ago, you rode with the Crimson Ridge Gang." Snake Eye's smirk dissolved. The name Fort Apache was a ghost from his past, a massacre where 30 soldiers died. Supply trains were looted, and survivors were silenced. Except one had lived. "You're him," Snake Eye whispered, "the soldier who testified." Ezra's hand hovered near his revolver, fingers twitching slightly, 2 missing digits marking an old wound. "Sergeant Ezra Blackwood, 5th Cavalry," he confirmed. "I watched you shoot my commanding officer in the back." The tension thickened. This was no longer about a girl. This was justice long delayed. Snake Eye's bravado cracked. He knew the stories of that sergeant's marksmanship, deadly precise even under fire. "Draw when ready," Ezra said, voice steady. But Snake Eye hesitated. For the first time, fear replaced arrogance. His mind raced. Should he gamble on a draw or find a way to flee? Survival suddenly outweighed reputation. The murmur inside the Red Lantern Saloon had barely settled when a sudden shift cut through the room like a blade. From a corner steeped in shadows, a rough hand lifted slowly into the air, halting the auction in its tracks. Conversations died mid-sentence as curious. Suspicious eyes turned toward the unseen figure daring to intervene. On the makeshift wooden platform near the bar, Clara Montgomery stood rigid. Only 19, her auburn hair glistened under the dim lamplight, framing her pale, terrified face. Her fingers gripped the worn fabric of her tattered dress, her breath shallow. She had been dragged here to repay her father's debts stained with more than just cards and whiskey. The bidding had stalled at $30, until that lone hand broke the stillness. Snake-Eye Malachi's smug grin faltered when he saw the challenger. His gold teeth glimmered as he turned his head. Try to see who would dare disrupt what he believed was already his. Snake-Eye ruled Dust Creek like a king. His men controlled the saloons, the brothels, even the sheriff's office. No one crossed him. Until now. Ezra Blackwood rose from the shadows. His tall frame unfolded slowly, like a man carrying years of buried sorrow. The lines etched into his face told a life shaped by loss and hardship. His steel-gray eyes, cold and sharp, fixed on Snake-Eye without a hint of fear. From his coat, he pulled a small leather pouch. The coins inside chimed as they struck one another, their sound slicing through the tense air. "50, Ezra said, voice hoarse but steady. Gasps echoed throughout the room. $50 was more than most men earned in months. Clara's pulse quickened. She didn't know if the stranger was her salvation or simply a new kind of danger. Snake-Eye's grin twisted into a scowl. Pride and reputation hung heavily over him, and he couldn't afford to lose face in front of his men. 60, he snapped back. Without pause, Ezra responded, 75. The saloon filled with whispers. Snake-Eye's jaw tightened. He had power, but even his pockets weren't bottomless. And yet, losing now would destroy the fear he had built his rule upon. Jeremiah Cross, his right-hand man, leaned in and whispered. Whatever he said made Snake-Eye's face curl into a sinister grin. "No more bidding, farmer," Snake-Eye declared, voice dripping with venom. "We'll settle this like men. Outside, right now, winner takes the girl. Loser doesn't leave breathing." The crowd roared with excitement, eager for blood. Ezra's hand drifted to his side, revealing the worn leather of his holster beneath his coat. But instead of fear, there was only grim certainty in his eyes. "I didn't come here for a fight," Ezra said calmly. "Only for her freedom." Snake-Eye let out a harsh laugh. "Freedom's earned at the barrel of a gun. Stranger, you'll pay one way or another." The doors flung open as the crowd poured into the dusty street. Snake-Eye strutted to the center, his spurs jingling with every step. 12 notches were carved into his revolver's handle, trophies of the men he had gunned down. Ezra followed, his steps slow and deliberate. "Turn back, farmer," Snake-Eye called mockingly. "Drop your gold. Crawl back to your fields. and I might spare you." Ezra stopped, unwavering. The setting sun cast long, ominous shadows between the two men. Clara stood behind him, her heart pounding as the town held its breath. "You look familiar, farmer," Snake Eye said, suspicion creeping into his voice. "Have we crossed paths before?" Ezra's reply was quiet but thunderous in the silence. "Fort Apache. 7 years back. Crimson Ridge Gang." Snake Eyes stiffened. The memory of Fort Apache surfaced. A massacre that left dozens of soldiers dead. Only one had survived. "You," Snake Eye breathed. "You're the cavalryman." "Sergeant Ezra Blackwood. 5th Cavalry," Ezra confirmed. "I watched you shoot my commanding officer in the back." The energy shifted. This wasn't about Clara anymore. It was about debts long overdue. Snake Eye's swagger cracked. He knew the rumors. Ezra was a dead-eye shot, disciplined by war. "Draw when ready," Ezra whispered. Snake Eye hesitated. His confidence faltered. He flicked his gaze toward his men positioned among the crowd, and Clara saw it. The barely visible nod he gave them. Her scream ripped through the air as she spotted Jeremiah Cross on the rooftop, raising his rifle. But her warning came a heartbeat too late. The gunshot shattered the silence. Ezra hurled himself sideways, the bullet tearing into a wooden post where his head had been. Chaos exploded as the townsfolk scattered, but Ezra rolled fluidly, drew his revolver, and fired. Jeremiah Cross toppled from his perch, dead before he hit the ground. Snake Eye cursed and reached for his gun, but comfort had dulled his reflexes. Ezra's second shot smashed his wrist, sending the weapon spinning into the dust. "You should have played it fair," Ezra said, stepping forward, his Colt aimed at Snake Eye's chest. But the fight wasn't over. 2 more of Snake Eye's men burst from the general store with rifles raised. The trap was fully sprung. Before they could fire, an unexpected voice shouted, "Enough!" Doc Patterson stepped forward, his medical bag in hand. "This man saved my grandson at Fort Apache. I won't watch him be murdered like this." Others emerged from hiding. Martha Jenkins, young Tommy Wright, even Sheriff Morrison, who had once cowered under Snake Eye's thumb. The sheriff finally drew his gun and pointed it at Snake Eye's men. "Doc's right. We've lived in fear long enough." Snake Eye clutched his bleeding wrist, his glare full of rage. "You fools! My brother's gang will burn this town to the ground." Ezra seized Snake Eye's vest and pressed his revolver to the outlaw's head. "Your brother's dead. Hung in Tombstone. I was there." The lie rolled smoothly off Ezra's tongue, shattering the last threads of fear that held Snake Eye's men loyal. Their rifles wavered. Without their leader's myth, they were just thugs facing an armed town ready to fight. "This is how it's going to be," Ezra declared. "You and your men leave Dust Creek within the hour. You don't return. If I see you again, mercy won't be offered." Snake Eye's eyes gleamed with sick cunning. "You're making a mistake. Farmer, letting me live signs everyone's death warrant." Ezra's hand trembled as the weight of the decision bore down on him. The townsfolk behind him murmured, some doubting, others afraid. Doc Patterson spoke gently. "Son, sometimes mercy becomes justice in its own time." Clara stepped forward, voice breaking through the tension. "If my father's sins curse me, I'll carry that burden. But don't let his evil turn you into a killer." Tears streamed down her face, but her words rang with strength. "Ezra risked his life to give me freedom. Don't poison that sacrifice with blood." Snake Eye sneered. "You don't know the full story, girl. Your father sold Chinese workers into the mines. Men, women, children died because of him. That's why you're here, to pay that debt." The revelation hit Clara like a hammer, her face pale with shock. But Ezra's resolve remained. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. "You have 1 hour," he repeated coldly. "Then you're gone." Snake Eyes stumbled toward his horse, a twisted smile curling across his face. But Clara's heart froze. He was heading toward the schoolhouse where the town's children were hiding. "The schoolhouse!" Clara gasped. "The children?" Ezra spun as Snake Eye kicked open the door, pulling a small derringer from his boot. Inside, Miss Henderson stood protectively before 8 terrified children. "New deal, farmer." Snake Eye shouted, blocking the doorway. I take one kid. Try to stop me, they all die. Ezra's jaw clenched as the townsfolk froze behind him. One wrong move would mean slaughter. Then Clara did the unthinkable. She stepped forward. Take me instead, she said boldly, walking toward the schoolhouse. Leave the children. I'll go with you. The heavy air inside the saloon tightened as the auctioneer's voice echoed through the room, rattling like a dry wind to the broken windows of Dust Creek. Clara stood on the platform, her hands trembling at her sides, trying to hide her fear behind a thin mask of defiance. She was only here because of her father's reckless debts. Debts paid not with coin but with her freedom. As the bidding dragged on, a voice cut to the murmurs, a deep, steady voice in the back of the room. $50. The saloon went silent. Every head turned toward the man stepping from the shadows. He was tall, lean, wearing a long brown duster that fluttered slightly with each step. His face was lined with years of hardship, his eyes sharp and cold like steel tempered by fire. Snake-Eye Malachi's smirk vanished at the sight of the man. His reputation ruled this town for years, and no one dared challenge him, until now. Snake-Eye narrowed his eyes. 60. The stranger didn't flinch. 75. The crowd buzzed with disbelief. Snake-Eye's lips curled as he tried to read this man, calculating whether it was worth escalating. Finally, with a sneer, he spat on the ground. No more bids. Settle this outside. You want the girl? Win her. The doors swung open as everyone spilled into the dusty street. Snake-Eye's men took position on rooftops and in alleyways, their rifles ready. Clara's heart raced. This wasn't a simple duel. It was a trap. As they faced off under the scorching sun, Snake-Eye squinted at the stranger. You look familiar. The man's voice was steady. Fort Apache. 7 years ago. Recognition flashed in Snake-Eye's eyes. The cavalry sergeant. Ezra Blackwood, he confirmed. You shot my captain in the back. Snake-Eye's bravado faltered for the first time. His fingers hovered above his holster, sweat beading at his brow. Ezra stood like stone, waiting. Then Snake-Eye gave the faintest nod. From a rooftop across the street, Jeremiah Cross raised his rifle. Clara saw it and screamed, but the shot fired before her words reached Ezra's ears. Ezra dove, rolling across the dirt as the bullet smashed into a wooden post behind him. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver and fired. Jeremiah fell from the roof, lifeless before he struck the ground. Snake-Eye grabbed for his weapon, but years of indulgence had dulled his reflexes. Ezra's second shot shattered his wrist, sending the revolver flying into the dust. You should have fought straight, Ezra growled, stepping forward, his gun aimed at Snake-Eye's chest. But the danger wasn't over. 2 more Snake-Eye's men burst out of the general store with rifles trained on Ezra's back. That's when Doc Patterson, the town's physician, stepped forward, voice firm. Enough. This man saved my grandson at Fort Apache. I won't watch him die like this. One by one, townsfolk emerged from their hiding spots. Martha Jenkins, young Tommy Wright, Sheriff Morrison, long under Snake-Eye's thumb, now raised his weapon as well. Doc's right. We've lived afraid long enough. Snake-Eye's bleeding hand trembled. If you kill me, my brother's men will burn this town to the ground. Ezra seized him by the vest, pressing his revolver to Snake-Eye's temple. Your brother's dead, hung in Tombstone. I was there. The lie rolled out cold and convincing, breaking what was left of Snake-Eye's hold on his men. They lowered their rifles, realizing their leader's power was crumbling. You have 1 hour to leave town, Ezra said, voice ringing out. If you return, there'll be no mercy. But Snake-Eye's grin returned, sharp and venomous. You fool. Mercy will cost you everything. Behind Ezra, the townspeople stirred, doubt creeping into their faces. Clara stepped forward, voice steady but filled with emotion. My father's sins brought me here. If anyone must pay, let it be me. But don't let his wickedness turn you into a killer. Snake-Eye saw an opportunity. Tell him, girl. Tell him about your father selling laborers to die in those mines. Family's gone because of him. Your price was set long ago. The truth struck Clara like a hammer. Her father's debts hadn't been about cards. They'd been about lives. But even as the weight of it crushed her, Ezra's hand didn't waver. Slowly, he lowered his weapon. "You leave," he repeated. 1 hour. Snake Eyes stumbled toward his horse, his smile now curling with something darker. Clara noticed too late. He was veering toward the schoolhouse where the children had been hidden. The schoolhouse! Clara gasped. Ezra turned as Snake Eye kicked in the door. Inside, Miss Henderson stood shielding the frightened children. Snake Eye pulled a small derringer from his boot, using his body to block the doorway. "New bargain," he sneered. "I walk out with one kid. You follow, they all die." Ezra froze, his mind racing. One false move could trigger a massacre. Then Clara stepped forward again, voice clear. "Take me, leave the children." "No." Ezra grabbed her arm, but she broke free. "It started with me. It ends with me." Snake Eyes studied her, tempted. But then, tiny Sarah Wright stepped out from behind Miss Henderson. "Mister, my mama says hurt people do bad things 'cause they're scared." The little girl said gently, "You can have supper with us if you're scared." Her innocence cut through the tension like a knife. For a brief moment, something shifted in Snake Eyes' cold eyes. That flicker of humanity was all Ezra needed. In one fluid motion, Ezra fired. The derringer flew from Snake Eyes' hand as he staggered, clutching his wounded shoulder. But Snake Eye still had one final act of malice. From inside his vest, he pulled a stick of dynamite, yanking the pin with his teeth. "If I can't have her," he hissed, "no one will." The fuse hissed like a snake as smoke curled from its tip. Ezra had seconds. Everyone out. Ezra shouted, charging into the schoolhouse. Miss Henderson grabbed children, shoving them through windows. Ezra lunged at Snake Eye, but the outlaw clutched the dynamite tightly, determined to die with everyone. Clara saw what was happening and did the unthinkable. She threw herself into Snake Eye, pinning the dynamite against his chest. "You'll have to kill me first," she said, voice trembling but firm. Ezra calculated the impossible. He couldn't stop the explosion, but he might control its direction. With desperate strength, he grabbed both of them and hurled them into the corner beneath the stone foundation, twisting his body to shield Clara. The explosion ripped through the building like thunder, collapsing part of the schoolhouse. Smoke, splinters, and dust swallowed them all. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then coughing, crying, townsfolk scrambled toward the ruins. Doc Patterson reached them first. "Here," he called. Clara emerged, coughing but alive. Ezra lay beneath a beam, bloody but breathing. He had shielded her with his body. Snake Eye wasn't so lucky. His crushed body lay buried beneath the rubble, his reign of terror ended by his own hand. As Doc bandaged Ezra's wounds, Clara reached to check his pulse. Her hand brushed against something tucked inside his shirt, a worn photograph. She froze. The picture showed a young woman with auburn hair and kind eyes that looked just like hers. On the back were faint words. "My beloved daughter Emma, may you find happiness I couldn't give you. Love, always, Papa." Her breath caught. This wasn't random kindness. This man was her father. Doc Patterson noticed her shock. "You found it, didn't you?" he said softly. "You knew." Clara whispered. The old doctor nodded. "Your name isn't Clara Montgomery. You're Emma Blackwood. When your mother died in the influenza outbreak, Ezra gave you to your aunt's family, thinking you'd be safer." Ezra stirred, his eyes fluttering open. When he saw the photograph in her hand, tears streamed down his face. "Emma," he whispered, voice breaking. "My little girl." "Why?" she choked. "Why did you let me believe you were gone?" Ezra's voice trembled. "After your mother died, after the war, I was broken. I thought the Montgomerys could give you a better life. But when I heard what Snake Eye planned, I couldn't stand by again." Around them, the town began to rebuild. Snake Eye's men had scattered. For the first time, children played freely in the streets. Sheriff Morrison approached. "Ezra, the marshal wants to speak to you. There's a reward for information on the Crimson Ridge Gang." But Ezra's eyes never left his daughter. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, but if you'll let me, I'd like to be your father again." Clara looked at the man who had risked everything, not because she was a stranger, but because she was his greatest treasure. "My name is Clara now," she whispered. "Clara Montgomery died that day in the saloon. But maybe Emma Blackwood can live again." As the sun dipped below Dust Creek, father and daughter walked side by side toward the small house at the edge of town, ready to rebuild what had been broken and rediscover what they thought was lost forever,